And with spring training nearing a close, our guest today will be Cleveland Indians play-by-play announcer Jim Rosenhaus.
There is a buzz back for Cleveland Indians baseball. It is a very upbeat camp. The Indians went really abnormal. They went on a huge spending spree. $117 million they spent on free agents. But who do they need to manage those free agents? Terry Francona. This is a much better Cleveland Indians team right now in spring training than it was a year ago.
And we're live here in the Union at Buffalo State College. I'm the host of the show, AJ Speier, joined alongside by Aubrey Gibert. We'll be having Jim Rosenhaus, Cleveland Indians play-by-play announcer, call in shortly within the next 5 minutes. Aubrey, quickly give our listeners an update on the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, we have Temple up on NC State right now in the second half, 49-41. Miami is up at halftime big over Pacific, 40-19. Just tipping off, you have Creighton trailing Cincinnati 6-2, just 5 minutes into the game. And then earlier today, Duke came out with a 73-61 win over Albany. And Mississippi, first upset of the day, came through with a 57-46 victory over Wisconsin, who was a 5 seed. I bet that beat a lot of brackets. Hurt my bracket a little bit.
How many brackets are ruined so far? I mean, you had people picking Davidson to win. I was one of those people who thought Oklahoma State was going to go to the Sweet 16. I believe there's another game, too, like the Harvard.
Yeah, Harvard beat New Mexico.
Hurt my bracket.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they call it the perfect bracket challenge, because nobody ever wins. I mean, I think there's maybe one person who gets it perfect every year. Maybe?
You have to submit
out of
how many?
Over millions?
It's just pure luck when it happens. I mean, this year,
especially for a lot of teams where you don't even know about them, it's hard to pick.
And Gonzaga almost lost yesterday.
Yeah, they're gonna lose real quick. They're gonna probably. I didn't have them losing yesterday, but they're gonna probably lose next week. If they might lose tomorrow to Wichita State, because Wichita State ratchets up on defense, and Gonzaga is they haven't really played anybody this year. That's my opinion, but maybe yesterday was a wake up call for them. But I don't see them getting past the Sweet 16, to be honest with you. They're not a team that, in my mind, is a number one seed team. I thought Miami should have got a number one seed over Gonzaga, personally.
I mean, obviously, the ACC is a tougher conference, but when you look at the record Gonzaga had, you kind of had to put them in there. It's one of those things where you remember college football, and you had Boise State, and they were always great every single year, undefeated, and they were always getting screwed out of the BCS. But then when they would face a team like Oklahoma, and they would beat them, and you're like, oh, hey, they can play here, so that's why they put Gonzaga there. But we have to go over to baseball, obviously, because we're going to have Jim Rosenhaus call in shortly. The Cleveland Indians have a great 1 through 9 lineup as far as hitters are concerned. Pitching is still an issue. You have Ubaldo Jimenez, Justin Maston, inconsistent top 2 starters in your rotation. Brett Myers is a relief pitcher who's reconverting to a starter. He'll be the number 3. Zach McAllister will be the 4. And there's currently a battle for the number 5 pitcher between Scott Kazmir and Carlos Carrasco. We have Jim Rosenhaus calling right now. How you doing today, Jim?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to the season for the Cleveland Indians. What are your thoughts so far on spring training?
So far, it's been a real good spring training. Everything's been going well, and it's kind of quiet, which is a good thing. Obviously, there's a big change here with the new manager in Terry Francona, and some serious upgrades in terms of the amount of experienced talent they have. Nick Swisher, huge addition. Michael Bourne, big addition in the offseason, as well as some others that really have increased the depth for this ball club. So a lot of optimism here. You never know till the season gets going exactly what you have, and I think there's still some concerns on the pitching staff, especially starting-wise, what they have. But a lot more optimism this year heading into the season, I think, because of some of the changes that have happened this offseason.
In the late 1990s, the Indians were playoff contenders, including 2 trips to the World Series. Since 2000, they've made the playoffs just twice, with the last time being 2007. Why do you think they've struggled to be a playoff contender since Larry Dolan purchased the franchise?
Well, I think, they had made some good trades in the early 90s to upgrade their talent, and they hung on to that talent. And I think one of the hardest things to do is as you go through a stretch of tremendous play, and there was a time there where the Indians had one of the most feared lineups in baseball. Eventually, those players get older, and what do you do to replace them? And to some extent, I think the Indians struggled through a period where they didn't necessarily develop their own talent, and that hurt them. And I think the market size that they're in, they have to do that to be a consistent winner. I think you've seen it with Tampa Bay. They've been able to hit upon a formula that works for them and allows them to compete in a division where a lot of people thought they never could. And there's no reason to think that the Indians can't do the same. But also, just certain things did not go right. And when you look at 07, they were a game away from making it to the World Series, and who knows how things would have been different had they made it to that World Series and won that World Series. It could be a very different discussion today as to what's happened since '07 compared to what did actually happen. So, there's a fine line, but I think bottom line is they just haven't had the influx of talent that they had in the 90s to really help them sustain consistent winning.
Now, we've talked about how the Indians haven't been consistently good the last couple of seasons, years. So what enticed a winning manager such as Terry Francona to come to Cleveland?
Well, I think he was, he was looking for a situation that he was comfortable with. He has a past relationship with the general manager, Chris Antonetti, and also the team president, Mark Shapiro, two people that he has a lot of respect for, and really, I think, wanted to work in that environment. He had a great run in Boston, but I think there were challenges up there for him that would take him away from just devoting his 100% attention to putting the best ball club he could out on the field. And it's probably the case anywhere you go, but I think it's magnified in Boston because of how passionate the fan base is about their team and some things that were going on, just in the front office that made it a challenge at times to get things done. And I think he was looking forward to coming to a place where he could get back on the field during spring training and really teach and be an impact manager in the clubhouse. And I think we've seen that here. He's so relaxed. He's really enjoying it. And I think it's a breath of fresh air for him to have stepped away for a year, kind of recharge the batteries, and then come into a situation where every move he makes or everything that happens, either player-wise or front office-wise, isn't analyzed and reanalyzed and then analyzed again on a daily basis. You just don't have that in Cleveland, and it's probably refreshing to him.
Now, you mentioned there's a lot of optimism around the team with the acquisitions of Bourne, Swisher, Stubbs, and Reynolds. The Indians appear to have a much better solid lineup 1 through 9. What are the chances that the lineup will be able to carry the team into the postseason?
Well, it's rare that it does. You have to have good pitching at some point. But I will say this, that last year the Indians struggled offensively most of the year. They finished 13th in the American League in runs scored, and not too many teams that finish that far down in runs scored can make a playoff run regardless of how your pitching is. Well, you combo that with the team that had the highest ERA among their starting rotation in the league, and it's a tough combination. So it'll help. It might give the pitchers more of a cushion if they need it on certain nights. And, there's something to be said. If you can go from less than 4 runs a game on average to about 4.5, close to 5, that is a huge difference. And I think that's what they're looking for this year. And it's not going to, just an improved offense is not going to get them to the playoffs. They need better pitching, and maybe that's there. But it certainly will help.
Now, with, the acquisitions of, Reynolds and Swisher and Bourne, all veteran guys, how much pressure is it on the younger guys, not many guys, but guys such as Lonnie Chisenhall, who finally seems to have taken the grasp at third base now? How much pressure will there be on Lonnie Chisenhall this season?
Well, I think for guys like him and Jason Kipnis and even to some extent Michael Brantley. It takes pressure off of them, I think. They not necessarily Chisenhall, but I know last year Kipnis was counted on as a major cog in the offense, and that's not fair to a second-year major league player. Somewhat similar to Carlos Santana. Here's a young guy who's still trying to learn the finer points of catching, and oh, by the way, go ahead and hit cleanup in your first or second year in the major league. So they won't have to do that this year, and they won't be counted on to provide leadership in the clubhouse this year, which they were last year, and I think that'll make all the difference in the world for them. They can just go out and play and develop as you would expect a young major leaguer to, and I think you may see the benefits of that. Chisenhall's had a great spring. Santana hasn't been here much because he's been at the World Baseball Classic, but I think Chisenhall and Kipnis and Brantley are all poised to just have solid seasons without having to worry about carrying a ball.
Now, when the Indians traded Shin-Soo Choo, they got back Drew Stubbs, but it appeared that Trevor Bauer was the prize. Why do you think the Indians decided to send him to AAA to start the season?
They just didn't feel he was ready. That's the bottom line. And they had other alternatives that they felt were better to start the season. And the one thing Terry Francona has said, he doesn't want to put young players on this roster unless they can help the team win. And Bauer might be able to do that, but he feels he'll be much more ready to do that, whether it's a month, 2 months, 3 months down the road. After some time at AAA, he feels he'll be much better prepared to do that. They saw some great things from him this spring. His off-speed stuff was outstanding. Fastball command wasn't where it needed to be, and they feel that some time in the minor leagues can help him to that end. So there's no rush. He's 22, drafted 2 years ago, and there's no rush with him. They have other alternatives in the starting rotation at this point that they feel very comfortable with, so there was no need to rush him. So, I think if he had been lights out this spring, sure, he'd be in the starting rotation on the opening day roster. But he was okay and had some of those bumps in the road that you'd expect from a young pitcher, and there's no reason to rush him. So they sent him out actually just earlier this week to get his season going at the AAA level.
Now, staying on the pitching side, how much pressure will there be on Brett Myers, who was seen to be the third starter, even Ubaldo Jimenez, who hasn't really played up to his Cy Young years a couple years ago since the Indians acquired him? How much pressure is on those two guys to step up this year?
Well, I think every player goes into a season with a certain degree of expectations, whether you call that pressure or not. That I think that's based on the player. But for Jimenez, no question that he has to perform better than he has since the Indians traded for him. The stretch in Colorado, the season before the trade, when he was the starting pitcher for the National League for the All-Star game, that may be a point in time in his career, a 3-month stretch that he never had before and that he never equals. I don't think he will. You talk to scouts, he's not throwing as hard. He's down a couple of miles an hour from then. But can he be a good pitcher at 94, 95 miles an hour with better command? Absolutely. He has good stuff, and I know he has felt very good this spring. Feels that he owes the Indians. He has said that. He hasn't performed up to his expectations or the team's expectations, and he feels that he needs to give them a good season this year. Brett Myers, I think that they'd love it. I don't know a win total, but I think they feel if he gets 200 innings, that the wins will be there. And that's what they're looking for, just a stabilizing innings leader in the rotation. Veteran guy coming over from Houston, has had seasons when he's been a starter where 200 innings has been a very reasonable plateau for him. And if he gets there, they feel that the wins will be there too.
Aside from the trade and the huge free agency signings, the Indians made a lot of interesting minor league deals this offseason with players such as Scott Kazmir, Dice K, Jason Giambi, Matt Capps, Jeremy Hermida, Ryan Rayburn. Which players do you foresee making the 25-man roster on opening day?
Well, it sure looks like Casimir is going to be the fifth starter unless something drastic happens here the last week to 10 days of spring training. He's been outstanding this spring, seems to be close to the pitcher he was when he was with Tampa Bay and one of the better lefties in the American League. So that's been an extremely pleasant surprise. They want Jason Giambi to make this team. He's been tremendous in the clubhouse. They love his leadership qualities and what he brings. We mentioned earlier about those younger players. He takes the pressure off of Chisenhall and Kipnis and Brantley, while at the same time really being kind of that conscience in the clubhouse. If drills aren't being done properly or he sees something that's just not going to fly, he's not afraid to say it, and he has the background and experience where it means something. Now the key is, can he still hit it at the age of 42? So far this spring, it seems like he has another season left in the tank, and I know they want him to make this club, and I think they'll probably shore that up here in the next week or so before they leave camp. And Ryan Brayburn's been a great surprise. Looks like he's going to make this team as a utility player. So some pretty good signings that, they're under the radar because they're the type of signings where it's a minor league contract with a major league invite, and it's a non-roster type situation. But in a lot of cases, they could really be helpful for the Indians.
Now, one of my favorite players was Grady Sizemore as a kid growing up because I got to see him at the Bison games a lot. Obviously, now he's a free agent and he's injury prone. He had great potential as a 5-tool star at one point. He's supposed to be back mid-season and can possibly sign with the team then. Do you think he can still contribute at the level he used to?
Honestly, I don't. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, but it has been a long time now since he's played. And it's a shame because he really was, when he was healthy, he was an Iron Man the first several years of his career. You couldn't get him out of the lineup, and it really is a shame what's happened, but it's 6 surgeries in the last 3 years, and the Indians took a chance last year and basically spent $5 million on a player who never set foot on the field during the regular season. I think someone will take a chance on him. What they get remains to be seen, but I think it would be extremely difficult for him to come back and reach the level of play that he performed at when he was at his best. Now, you could get a decent Grady Sizemore if he is healthy, but in terms of that all-star quality player, I find that hard to believe. He's just missed too much time with too many injuries since his high point as a major leaguer.
Now, with all this said, a lot of unpredictability going on. Do you see the Indians making a push to the playoffs this year? Obviously, the Yankees aren't the same team they were last year, but obviously Toronto has gotten better. So there might be maybe a wild card spot open. What are your thoughts on the playoffs going into this year? Do the Indians have a chance?
Well, I think they do, and of course everybody does it in spring training, but is the division winnable? As good as Detroit was last year, the division was still up for grabs heading into September. And then they went on, they got hot at the end and played well, got into the World Series. And it would seem as if the Tigers are improved with the return of Victor Martinez and the addition of Torrey Hunter and a solid pitching staff. It would seem that they're improved, but the Indians played them very well last year during the regular season. So, their avenue obviously would be to win the division first. It's going to be a challenge because of the depth of the Tigers' rotation. Wild card's so hard to say. It really is. That you mentioned the American League East, but look at the American League West. Your division champion is Oakland, and then you have Texas and Anaheim, who are, star-studded. So there's going to be a ton of teams in the mix. I think it's so hard to predict. I think the Indians will go as far as their starting pitching takes them, and that is a big question mark to start the season.
All right, my final question for you is going to be, obviously you're a former broadcaster of the Buffalo Bison games as a play-by-play announcer. They're now partnered with the Toronto Blue Jays. What are your thoughts on the move for the Bisons?
Well, just, having been back there a little bit during the off season and talking to the GM, Mike Buczkowski, it sounds like it's been a great start to the relationship. And, their farm system, I know they made a ton of trades where they lost some top prospects that probably would have gone to Buffalo, but it seems like they have a deep farm system, and then they're going to go ahead and sign some of those veterans that you need. And, it's a major league team that's right up the road that could have some success this year, certainly, based on some of the changes that they've made. So I think it's exciting. I think it's going to be a great relationship. I know front office-wise, it's been outstanding so far, and I think that'll carry over to the field. It should be a lot of fun and maybe a breath of fresh air after the last couple of years, because I know it hasn't been the best.
All right. Thank you, Jim, for joining our show. Good luck to the Cleveland Indians this season. Hopefully they can finally end that curse of the Rocky Colavito.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. All right. That was Jim Rosenhaus, play-by-play announcer for the Cleveland Indians, joining our show. Big expectations for this team as far as we are concerned, because we're both fans. They have a great 1 through 9 lineup. Currently, it's projected to look like this. Michael Bourne will be leading off. Asdrubal Cabrera will be the number 2 hitter. Jason Kipnis at the 3. Nick Swisher 4. Carlos Santana, who he mentions at the World Baseball Classic, will be the 5 hitter. Mark Reynolds who will be DHing. Michael Brantley, Lonnie Chisenhall, Drew Stubbs. Solid 1 through 9 lineup, but when you look at the pitching staff, you're going to have Justin Masterson, Ubaldo Jimenez, Brett Myers, Zach McAllister, and as Rosenhaus mentioned, it looks like it's going to be
Scott
Kazmir.
Yeah, definitely maybe not the greatest 1 through 9 lineup, but definitely a consistent lineup, I think, based on what you've had in the last couple of years.
Yeah, a lot more exciting.
And then you bring in some right-handed batters to a team that's been lefty dominated the last couple of years. I think that was more important than anything, was just to get some more balance in the lineup, more so than getting more pop.
And leadership too, don't forget.
You got veteran leadership, you got balance, and you got speed. And we all know what speed does in baseball. And I think a guy like Michael Bourne, bringing him in, it gives you a guy that's going to lead off every single game, and then it puts everybody else in their own position. Now you don't have. Now Brantley doesn't have to worry about am I hitting leadoff today? Am I hitting third today? Am I hitting seventh? Because that's how I felt he was last year. I thought he produced a lot at the leadoff spot, but
Landon really didn't have much.
He just was flipped around so much that you really can't produce consistently when you're moved around so much, and you pretty much now have 3 center fielders playing outfield. Because all 3 guys, Drew Stubbs, Michael Brantley, and Michael Bourne, all played center field at one point in time in their career.
And for those who don't know what he's talking about out there, it means that they can move around more in the outfield. They're not like your typical guy in the right field who can just catch it and throw it deep. Like, they're the guys who can actually run around and actually cover the outfield grass and catch the ball. More
range, yeah. And then you still have Nick Swisher on days if you want to give somebody off, can do that as well, and you can move Mark Reynolds to first base, who now was a full-time DH.
And you still have Ezekiel Carrera, who's now coming off the bench, and he was pretty good too. But one of the most underrated moves they made, which I didn't even mention with him, was the acquisition of Michael Villas, who's a utility player himself. So him and Ryan Rayburn will give his team plenty of options. They have really young middle infielders, and also on the corner, obviously, Lonnie Chisenhall. Kind of curious to see what happens if Jason Giambi were to make the team. Obviously, he'd probably be put in the DH situation because he really wasn't that great of a fielder as a first baseman, even in his prime. So Mark Reynolds would end up probably playing third base occasionally with Swisher at first or something like that. But yeah, I'm definitely excited about the hitting at least, but the pitching really concerns me. Ubaldo Jimenez, he goes from a hitter-friendly ballpark where he dominated it there for at least a good half season, but then he gets traded to the Cleveland Indians the year after, and he's just been terrible ever since, inconsistent. He's apparently trying a new pitching style to see if it'll work, but we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, he tried to switch up his mechanics.
Yeah.
But, it's like a bad trade since day one. I understand it was a move that at the time, the Indians, at that time they were buzzing and they were making a push for the playoffs. So why not go out and get an ace at the time? I don't blame them whatsoever. He had been a
Cy Young candidate at the time.
I don't blame him whatsoever. He was a Cy Young. I think he won the Cy Young, the year before that. And
he was a young pitcher who had plenty of years looking ahead, a positive future ahead of him. Obviously, it didn't work out. But then again, you're always banking on a lot when you gamble on prospects so that they're going to prosper. Drew Pomeranz really hasn't, who was the guy the trade was based on as the prospect. He really hasn't done much for Colorado yet, so it's not like the Indians really lost too much yet.
Look at the return. Are the guys they got producing way more than Jimenez has?
Aside from Pomeranz, I don't know if anyone else is even on the Rockies right now.
Yeah, so I think that it was not the greatest move, but I don't think it was
See,
the most biggest ripoff.
See, this is why, I mean, all right, you could say the same thing about the Indians when they traded Cliff Lee to the Phillies. Who did they get back in return? Carlos Carrasco, who was a pitcher.
Francisco.
Who they expected. Yeah, Ben Francisco. No, I don't think Francisco was in that deal.
They traded him to Philly, I believe.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about
Carlos Carrasco was the big guy in
Carrasco,
that trade.
and then they got Lou Marson as catcher, but obviously now they have Carlos Santana. There was talks before they acquired Nick Swish and everybody else that Santana would move over to first and Marson would be the catcher at one point, but obviously it hasn't worked out that way. But yeah, you're talking about Marson, you talk about Carrasco. Whenever you get a chance to acquire a big-name pitcher, I'm going all in for that. I mean, you look at what the Blue Jays did for R.A. Dickey. A lot of people are saying they gave a lot of prospects too much for him. Hey, if he can give you at least one good season, it's worth it.
Yeah, even Roy Halladay. I would, if I could get one of the top 5 pitchers in the game in a game where pitching dominates, why not go get it?
The one argument you can say against it is obviously the Yankees making that trade. They traded Jesus Montero for Michael Pineda, and obviously his velocity went down, and he hasn't been the same pitcher since. And you look at what Montero's doing now with the Seattle Mariners. He has a bright future ahead. He's going to be a guy who can get you 30 home runs every season. But he was a guy in the minor leagues who was a great hitter. He just couldn't catch. But it was just
that's another situation where you've traded for a one-year wonder, a guy who really only did it for 1 year.
Yeah,
and he was a rookie.
But they were trying to get.
I mean, he was young, and he still has a chance now. I mean, he was out all last season, but
his velocity's still down, though.
When we say a number one guy, we're talking about a guy who's established, who's been there, who's done it. Somebody like a Roy Halladay, and and even these guys like R.A. Dickey, who's at least been around. I mean, Michael Pineda is a young star on the rise, but he's not a guy who's done it consistently.
Well,
and obviously with younger pitchers, fatigue comes in and arm issues come in, and that's not a good sign when he's getting it already. And he's only pitched really one full season, not even a full season.
And the Indians have seen this happen also with CeCe Sabathia as well, because when they traded him to the Milwaukee Brewers, they ended up going after a guy like Matt Laporta, who was supposed to be this really great prospect, never merged or anything. There's questions whether or not he's actually going to make the team this year. More than likely, he's going to see another year in Columbus. This is what I mean. When you get a chance to go after a big-name player, it's kind of like the NBA. Like, you know how everyone's criticizing the Knicks for going after Carmelo. They gave way too much for him, Gallinari and all that. But you look at what they got, a superstar.
It's all about relevancy. And if you look at it, has Denver advanced past the first round?
They do have a good record though, but yeah, they haven't
advanced any further than the Knicks have.
Yeah.
So you really can't say who got the better of the trade.
All you can say is this: that the Knicks are more exciting to watch now since they got the superstars. So if you have a choice between going with a superstar, getting the prospects, go with the superstar every time. Well, we're gonna go to break. When we come back, we're gonna talk about the Buffalo Bills, maybe a little NBA talk as well. We have to talk about the Bills because last week I promised you I talked about the Moneyball strategy they're doing. So far, they just have Manny Lawson. A lot of question marks from Bills fans right now. I know my co-host is really upset because the Bills haven't made any moves yet. Stay tuned.
Voted Best Music Store 4 years running by Art Voice, Allentown Music buys, sells, and trades new and used instruments, accessories, PA systems, and much, much more. They also take care of your guitar and bass repairs, restringing, and maintenance. Located at 1113 Elmwood Avenue, Allentown Music is open from Monday through Friday, noon to 7, and Saturday, Sunday from noon to 5. You can give them a call at 716-883-2341 or check them out at allentownmusic.com.
This is 91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo.
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No, this is Patrick.
Listen online at WBNY.org.
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No, this is Patrick.
We are Buffalo's original alternative, WBNY.
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No, this is Patrick. I'm not a Krusty Krab.
Patrick, that's the name of the restaurant.
Huh?
Come and join DJ Star every Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m., playing your favorite jams in R&B, hip-hop, and gospel music. Catch DJ Star only on 91.3 FM, WBNY.
This is your 91.3 FM 33 Sports Update. The Nuggets defeated the 76ers 101-100, extending their win streak to a franchise-best 14 games thanks to Corey Brewer, who sunk 3 free throws with 2.1 seconds left to seal the victory. Brewer also had a career-high 29 points. The Trailblazers defeated the Bulls 99-89. LaMarcus Aldridge finished with 28 points, while teammate J.J. Hickson grabbed a career-high 21 rebounds. In the only other NBA game Thursday night, the Kings beat the Timberwolves 101-98. The win was Sacramento's third straight at home. In tonight's contest, the Miami Heat will look to push their win streak to 25 when they take on the Detroit Pistons at 7:30 on NBA TV. This is your 30-30 Sports Update on 91.3 FM WBNY.
We're back here on the Sports Reporters Radio Show. I'm the host, AJ Speier, joined alongside by Aubrey Gibert. Before the break, we had Cleveland Indians play-by-play announcer Jim Rosenhaus call into our show, talking about the Indians. A lot of optimism over there with their lineup. Obviously, the pitching is not as good. Personally, when I look at that division, I still think the Detroit Tigers are going to run away with the division, kind of like last year. But he mentioned it was a close race at the end between the White Sox and them. I think the White Sox and the Tigers will be the biggest challenge for the Indians. Can't sleep on Kansas City, though, because with all the prospects they have, they've been piling up. So there's a possibility that maybe the Indians could still finish in fourth place. What are your thoughts on that real quickly?
Yeah. Not expecting a playoff berth this year, maybe the year after. But I'm definitely looking for an improvement from last year. Maybe, within the 75, 80-something win mark. I mean, they won, I think, 65 or 66 last year.
They were 68 and 94 last year.
Yeah, so I'm definitely looking for at least 70 or 80 wins. I think Detroit's going to get to the World Series, honestly. I think they're going to go back again this year.
Yeah, look at this lineup. Austin Jackson, Torrey Hunter, Miguel Cabrera, Prince Fielder, Victor Martinez, who's coming back off the injury. He missed the whole season. Andy Dirks, Johnny Peralta, Alex Avila, and obviously Omar Infante.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why they brought Prince Fielder in last year was because of the loss of Victor Martinez in spring training. And now you get him back to add on to it. I mean, that only makes them better. And then you still got the best pitcher in the game and Justin Verlander on the team.
The one question mark is going to be their closer, though, because they have Bruce Rondon, who's coming up from Toledo, the AAA affiliate. They ended up getting rid of their former closer, Jose Valverde, who had the meltdown in the postseason. So a lot of pressure on a rookie coming in as a closer. We've seen some closers have some success in that situation. Jonathan Waldron, I want to say. The former closer from the Los Angeles Angels came in right away and had success. The closer, Craig Kimbrough for the Braves, has had success. So it's a possibility that they'll be set. I like the rotation. I like their lineup. I think that they're going to run away with the division. I mentioned Kansas City as a possibility. A lot of youngsters on this team, like, they don't jump out at you when you look at them. Alex Gordon, everyone knows about him. He's been an all-star the past few years. Salvador Perez is one of the best catchers, up-and-coming catchers in this league. Look out for him. Eric Hosmer was on Team USA in the World Baseball Classic. Jeff Francoeur, everyone remembers what he's capable of from with the Mets. And
still got Billy Butler.
Yeah, still Billy Butler. He was in the home run derby contest.
And he got James Shields and Irving Santana to add to the rotation. I mean, James Shields is a...
Well, James Shields is a great starter. Irving Santana is inconsistent. Wade Davis was a somewhat of a good pitcher with Tampa Bay Rays. And then they have Bruce Chen still and Jeremy Guthrie. So
I'd take James Shields on the Indians any day.
Well, I'd take any one of those pitchers over
so
what we have.
You got to put them in consideration then.
Yeah, so it's still possible that the Indians could choke. The Royals finished 72-90 this past season, so... And with the White Sox, they really didn't make any moves, but they didn't really have to. So, I mean, you look at this team real quickly. Alejandro De Aza will lead off. Jeff Keppinger they got this season. He's the only acquisition they really had. Alex Rios will be third. Canerco, Adam Dunn, Dan Viciedo, Alexi Ramirez, Tyler Flowers, and Gordon Beckham will be their lineup. As far as pitchers, Chris Sale, who almost was the Cy Young Award winner this past season. It went to David Price instead. Jake Peavy, who everyone remembers was a great pitcher before he had the injuries. John Danks, Gavin Floyd, and Jose Quintana will round out the rotation, and Addison Reed will be the closer, with Matt Thornton and Jesse Crane as the setup men. It's going to be a tough division for the Indians. I don't think it's going to be their year this year. Like I said, I think it's going to be
tough AL in general this year. I mean, there's a lot of parity, I believe, in
the sad part
American
is, like,
League.
The Yankees aren't nearly as good, but they're still the Yankees.
That's
they're
scary
still
part.
The Yankees.
That's the scary part, is that they're not even one of those teams we're talking about at the top of the American League. But the American League is going to be a tough just overall.
And the thing is, you want to overlook the Oakland Athletics too, but you can't do it because
No,
they won the
you
division
can't.
this
You really
past
can't.
year.
That's why
So
in American League West, the
And you
East,
have the Rangers, you have the Angels, and then you talk about a team like the Athletics who won the division. You look over at the AL East, you have the Toronto Blue Jays with the moves they made. You have the Orioles who somehow found their way into wild card this past season. The Rays, who when they have Longoria, are a really tough team to beat. The Red Sox, you never know what you're going to get out of them. The Yankees, as you mentioned, it's going to be a really interesting race this season. I mean, I'm looking forward to the season. I'm sorry, Indians. I don't think it's your year, though. You don't have the pitching.
No, you never know. So we'll see.
But
it's unpredictable because injuries occur.
But let's move on to our hometown team, the Buffalo Bills. As I mentioned before the break, the Bills really haven't made any moves yet other than Manny Lawson, a guy who they signed a 4-year, $12 million contract, $3 million per year, obviously. He'll be an outside linebacker who's going to cover tight ends such as Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, Dustin Keller for the Miami Dolphins. So they added somebody who can cover, but that's about it. You still have plenty of holes. Mario Williams wasn't really a great outside linebacker in the 3-4 with the Houston Texans. I believe he had 5 sacks and a pectoral muscle, the only injury that cost him the one season that he was in a 3-4 with the Houston Texans. So a lot of question marks there. You still don't know what you got in inside linebackers as far as Kelvin Shepard and Nigel Bradham. I like the possibility for the 3 linemen, Kyle Williams, Marcel Darius, and probably Alex Carrington. I think those 3 will be fine. Linebackers a huge concern. I know the previous show, Nick and Nate, they were talking about Brian Urlacher as a possibility, bring him in here. He's 35 years old. He's had injury problems. I'm not really looking at him. I would like somebody like a Carlos Dansby.
Yeah. That's a guy who, when I seen was released, was a guy I thought the Bills should bring in right away, simply because, A, he's familiar with the 4-3-4 system, and he's played in it pretty much his whole career. I mean, even before Miami, he played at Arizona where they were a dominant 3-4 team. As a Bills fan, you should know Carlos Dansby because of how many times he was in our backfield this year and years before. C.J. Spiller and Fred Jackson know about Carlos Dansby. Great penetrating linebacker, a guy who can stuff the run. A guy who's a little bit younger than Brian Urlacher. I mean, Urlacher's up there in age, like you said. Dansby, I think, is only 32, so not the youngest, but not the oldest either. And I think you can get him for a bargain price. I think you said his salary cap hit with the Miami Dolphins was like $6
million. I think it was 6.5 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind bringing him in for $3 or $4 million for the next 2 or 3 years to give, some young guy they might draft, some time to develop. So
he was actually set to make $15.1 million over his final 2 years, which is why it was basically a salary cap move because they wanted to get a little younger with a little more speed. That's why they ended up going with LRB, the guy from the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, but definitely a guy they should. I mean, if you were talking about bringing in a guy like Bart Scott and Calvin Pace, why not bring in somebody who wasn't expected to get released to begin with, and a guy who's younger and you could probably get cheaper than either of those two. That's just my opinion, but we'll see what the Bills do. But Dansby is definitely a guy that I think the Bills should be on the Bills' radar.
And I believe he had weight problems this past year with the Miami Dolphins. That's why they kind of struggled at the beginning of the season. They had a strong second half. Carlos Dansby lost like 30 pounds from what I'm reading in the Roto-World report on him. So if he can stay in shape, and he's probably going to be a bargain because he's 31 years old right now. His birthday is in November, so he'll be 32 by then. I wouldn't mind taking him from the standpoint of we really don't have any leadership on this team. I mean,
better leadership. Kyle
Williams technically could be your leader if you had to pick one on this team, him or Mario Williams. But I like a guy who's a quarterback of the defense, which is what the inside linebacker position is. You look at teams like the San Francisco 49ers who run a 3-4. Patrick Willis is somebody you fear. You look at someone like the Baltimore Ravens who've had a defense like that, you would always fear, obviously, Ray Lewis. The Jets, it was either Bart Scott or David Harris. So, yeah, I'd like to get somebody who actually scares somebody or intimidates them. Right now, Kelvin Shepard and Nigel Bradham doesn't scare anybody.
Yeah, and, even before, a couple shows ago, we talked about when was the last time the Bills had a dominating defense? It's when they had linebackers. They haven't been dominating since they had London Fletcher and Takeo Spikes. Even back when they had Sam Cowart and those guys. The Bills have not had dominant defense without linebackers, and you need those linebackers that teams fear.
Well, speaking of Takeo Spikes, he is a free agent. Not this point in his career.
Yeah, a little bit past his career, past his prime. But yeah, you need those guys down in the middle that make the running back think twice about going up the middle and make the quarterback think twice about standing in the pocket. And I think Carlos Dansby would be a guy like that who would put fear in other people's defense, or at least a guy that teams have to game plan for besides your defensive line, because not only now do you have to game plan for them, you have to worry about this guy at the second level getting to your quarterback or getting to the receiver or running back or whoever it is that has the ball. So I think you should go for a guy like him who's a veteran leader and can make plays, and you can get him for a relatively cheap price. Why not?
Yeah, you mentioned cheap prices. We mentioned the fact that Brian Urlacher is a free agent. The Bears don't want to sign him anymore. They ended up signing DJ Williams today, a former Denver Bronco who had been there from 2004 to 2012. His last season, he had a little problems because he had a suspension, so he really wasn't in the rotation. But he's a guy who can play weak side, strong side, and middle linebacker. He's a great fit for the Bears, and the fact that they're only bringing him in for $900,000 at base salary shows you what the market's like right now and why the Bills have waited as long as they have. I mean, his incentives can make the contract up to a 1.75, but if you can get someone like Carlos Dansby like that, I mean, you have to go for it. I mean, I don't mind the Bills waiting like that instead of overpaying for these free agents. You look at like the Miami Dolphins and what they paid for in Mike Wallace over there. Is he really a number one receiver? I mean, he's a guy who can be like a Deshaun Jackson and run down the field, but he can't run the short routes, the intermediate routes. He's going to have to prove me wrong.
Yeah. I think the first couple days of free agency, especially the first week of free agency, is for teams that have, that salary cap space that are willing to overpay those players, because I think, those first days you have to make your claim to this player, or otherwise they're going to go somewhere else and you might not be able to get them back. So you have to throw that money at them, like Mario Williams with the Bills last year. They had to throw the money at him because they knew if he left, he probably wasn't going to come back. So it's all about money. It's all about how much you have and how much you're willing to spend. And I think now what the Bills are doing right now is they're letting the first wave of top-tier players go, and now they're really seeing how the market is settling down. And, Brady Nix has come out and said they're going to make some more signings. Joe Buscaglia has come out and said that he thinks the Bills will make 5 or 6 signings. That would surprise me, but, I expect a couple more signings because they have to take the pressure off the draft where they only have, I think, 6 or 7 picks this year. So they have to make some moves because otherwise you can't. There's so many holes to fill. You can't put that all in the draft when you only have 6 or 7 picks. So the Bills are going to have to make some moves on some bargain free agents. And there's guys out there, like we talked about Carlos Dansby. We could use another receiver.
Well, let's look at linebackers just in itself. I mean, Darryl Smith, James Harrison, Sean Phillips, Nick Barnett. Those are the caliber of linebackers who are still out there that no one's even touched. Kelvin Pace as well. I know some of the Jets fans don't like him. Michael Boley from the New York Giants. All those linebackers. Larry Grant, Bart Scott, Brady James. There's plenty of great linebackers out there. You look at cornerbacks, the position the Bills really need as well. Chris Gamble, D'Angelo Hall, Antoine Winfield, Brent Grimes, Nnamdi Asomugha.
Didn't Chris? I swear.
Chris Gamble.
There was a report that he was going to retire.
Yeah, but you never know. They always change their mind. I mean, look what happened to Tony Gonzalez. He said he was going to retire, and he changed his mind.
Yeah, but I just heard after he got released that he was going to retire.
Yeah, Gamble is going to retire, but you never know if the right offer's there. He could always change his mind.
I don't see him come out of retirement for the Bills. He's going to come out for a team that's winning. He's not going to come out for a team that's. I mean, he's got his money. He's not worried about, and the Bills aren't looking to give him a big deal anyway. So, but yeah, even the corners. That's one position where I just don't understand why the Bills, if the quarterback is dry, then but how do you re-sign McKelvin when you have such great? I mean, the top 5 corners I'm looking at right now are all better than McKelvin. That's not even close of a comparison.
And apparently,
Antoine Winfield at his age now is better than McKelvin.
And if Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie gets a 5-year deal or $5 million deal from the Denver Broncos, just imagine how low these guys' value is. I mean, Antoine Winfield has plenty of options. He's a guy who I believe is like around 37 years old, but he had a great season for the Vikings this past year. But yeah, there's plenty of great players still on the market. You can get them for cheap prices.
Even Nnamdi, I mean, he'd be perfect for the Bills especially for Mike Pettine's defense, where he wants his corners to play man-to-man defense. That's all Nomley knows, and as you can see, he's not good in anything but man-to-man defense.
Well, the problem with the Eagles is they promoted an offensive line coach to defensive coordinator. One of the dumbest moves I've ever seen, which is why Andy Reid is now in Kansas City, in my opinion.
It's all about the money, though.
Yeah. When you talk about the money, I mean, obviously, Kerry Rhodes, Quentin Michael, those are safeties who were released as all the cap hits. Gerald Sensabaugh, Charles Woodson, Michael Huff, Nate Clemens, those are the key safeties out there. Although Rondé Barber's now a safety as well. I didn't even realize that. There's plenty of, like I said, there's plenty of talent out there. If you had to pick a position, I mean, obviously a lot of Bills fans want a receiver. There's a lot of question marks there. Because currently you have Steve Johnson, who there's talks they want to put him in the slot. So who would you put in the outside currently? I mean, you have Brad Smith, you have T.J. Graham. I don't think Bills fans want to see either one of them starting this year. Obviously, Steve Johnson's still going to start, but you got to have two other guys around him.
Yeah, I think T.J. Graham is automatically going to be a starter this year. I think Buddy Nix really likes him and his speed, especially to break the top off the defense. I think he thinks that's going to open it up more for Stevie Johnson over the middle. I mean, I would even bring in a guy like Brandon Lloyd. I mean, I like Brandon Lloyd.
He's got character concerns, though.
I like Brandon Lloyd, and I like Darius Hayward-Bay.
Yeah, Darius Hayward-Bay is a guy.
I love Darius Hayward-Bay.
He's got speed.
And a guy that Stevie likes. And it seems like whoever Stevie likes, the Bills don't like. Because everybody he's endorsed, they haven't even brought in.
He's got butterfingers, though.
He's a guy who would take a lot of pressure off of Stevie Johnson. And I think it's a perfect compliment because you're talking about, he had Stevie's a underneath route guy, and Hayward-Bay is a guy who stretches the field. And then if you have him and T.J. Graham, it takes a lot of pressure off of Stevie over the middle, and it opens it up for him more over the middle. And then if you bring in another tight end, that's even more weapons.
A receiver that nobody's really talked about yet is Laurent Robinson, who's a free agent. He went over to the Jacksonville Jaguars this past season with a lot of hype. Obviously, it didn't work out. I think it was more in the quarterback play of Blaine Gabbert and Chad Henne that he didn't really do much there. So if I were the Bills, I would give Laurent Robinson a try. I mean, if he costs you $2 million, I would definitely consider it.
Oh yeah, definitely. A guy who has size. I think he's 6'1". A guy who would be an upgrade over Donald Jones. So, but let me tell you, he's gonna make us pay this year. You don't like Donald Jones, but he's gonna prove to you how much a difference it is to have a quarterback. Well, Tom Brady's gonna have 75 to 80 catches this year for over 1,000 yards. He's gonna have about 8-10 touchdowns this year, and he's gonna have about 2 or 3 on the Bills in 2 games. I guarantee it.
I don't hate Donald.
And you're gonna sit there and think to yourself, "Why ain't do this for the Bills?" But it's not him. It's just quarterback. It's all about who your quarterback is, and he's a speed guy who's similar to Welker.
I don't hate Donald Jones. First off,
he's gonna produce.
I just don't like the fact
he's gonna hurt us.
He's injury prone. I mean, you look at his first season in the league where he was really a starter. He had 2 high ankle sprains that really limited his production, and then this past season he really regressed in my opinion. I mean, he had a few games where he had touchdowns. That's gonna happen in the NFL. He's not a guy who I would consider a number 2.
No, yeah, he's not a prototypical 2 receiver.
But watch, he'll become one in the New England Patriots offense. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. But there was a lot of reports out from Buffalo that was the reason why they didn't bring him back in was because of health concerns and them wanting to just move on to a new regime. And I applauded the moves, because it really made me think that they were going to move on. But they haven't made any moves, and it's just worrying me about who's going to start. I mean, we've only got 2 or 3 active receivers on the team, and you really don't want to put Brad. And are you really going to depend on Brad Smith to be a full-time receiver?
He did have
that scares me.
Well, the thing about Brad Smith is he was never really given the opportunity to just train as a wide receiver. He was being worked in as a quarterback, learning that part. It's kind of hard when you're trying 2 different positions to become good at one. As far as free agents, though, I would consider Ramses Barden maybe. You look at a guy in the New York Giants who he was given the opportunity because of injuries to Hakeem Nicks and I want to say
Victor Cruz.
Yeah, Victor Cruz. That he's a guy who has potential in this league. I would give him maybe $2 million per year, give him a shot. That's what you're looking at right now. The Bills aren't going to have to overpay for anyone. It's not going to be like last year when they tried to get Robert Meacham and end up going to the San Diego Chargers, you're not going to have to overpay for a receiver at this point. I don't mind the strategy. It's a Moneyball strategy like the Oakland Athletics. I mean, you're looking at a small market team. You can't compete with the Washington Redskins, the Dallas Cowboys, the Philadelphia Eagles kind of teams.
Yeah, so, we'll see what they do. Maybe we'll get a signing or two this week with the market settling down and, being able to see what's out there. Hopefully we make a couple moves. But
still need to get a tight end.
Yeah, and tight end, too. I mean,
Fred Davis is available. Kevin Boss. Look at one of those two, hopefully.
I would love a Fred Davis, especially because he won't be demanding that much because he's coming off an ACL injury. So
he also has suspension. He has some character issues as well. So,
but I mean, that way he can prove to us what he is for a relatively cheap price, and then you move on from there.
And then the other big position the Bills need to fill is obviously guard. There's two big name free agents in my opinion: Kevin Booth from the Giants, Brandon Moore from the Jets. Those are two guard possibilities. Ryan Lilja had his success when he was in the Indianapolis Colts years, but now he was with the Kansas City Chiefs this past year and struggled there. So it's kind of thin at the guard position. I personally think the Bills are going to target guard in the draft, whether it's the first or second round.
They've come out and pretty much I've heard Brandon Moore as an option, but the reports out is that he wants to play for a winning team, considering he's on the downside of his career. Obviously, like everybody wants to put Ryan Nassib on to connect to the Bills, people want to put Brandon Moore as a connection because of the simple fact that he was the guy who transitioned Brandon Moore from the defensive side of the ball to a guard.
Yeah.
And I would love Brandon Moore as a fill-in for Andy Levitri for the next couple of years. But
at any job, it's all about networking and who you know because you feel more comfortable because you know what they're capable of doing. I mean, I can definitely see it happening, but just because you know someone, I mean, you also know their weaknesses as well. So that's something to look out for there as well. Let's talk about the NBA because we haven't touched that in at least a good 3 or 4 weeks. The New York Knicks, they were once 18-5, and now they're currently somehow the Brooklyn Nets have clinched the playoff spot before them.
Well, that's just simply because they played more games. If you look at the records, the Knicks have a 1-game lead over them, but the Nets have played 2 more games. And if the Knicks beat the Toronto Raptors tonight, they actually will clinch a playoff berth. I mean, they're going to clinch a playoff berth regardless, but they're going to clinch. They definitely would clinch tonight if they win over Toronto. But Brooklyn simply has only, has clinched because they've played more games so far, and they played really, really well recently. Deron Williams, I'm telling you, second best point guard in NBA, and he's showing it. Ever since the All-Star break, where he's gotten rest and he's gotten healed up, has he not looked like an All-Star point guard?
It also takes time to really develop chemistry. I mean, you look at someone like Joe Johnson; he's a guy who shoot first, pass second.
And Brook Lopez has looked like the best. I'm very happy that the Nets did not make that trade for Dwight Howard. I think Brook Lopez gives them so much, offensive help down low. That team does not have that many. Let's be honest. There's only 3 scorers on the Brooklyn Nets, and that's Deron Williams, Joe Johnson, and Brook Lopez. But Brook Lopez is a pest down low.
Let's be honest. I personally
38 points on Wednesday. 38 from the center.
Let's be honest here about Dwight Howard. I personally think he's overrated. He's one of the best rebounders in the game. I'll give you that. You can also say the same thing about Kevin Love. But when it comes to scoring as well, he can't make the free throws, obviously. It's one of the worst parts of his game. As far as defense, yeah, if he puts the effort in and he's focused, yeah, he can be a great defender. I just don't think he's the best. I don't think he's the best in the league. I mean, I think Joakim Noah has some, or Joakim Noah, whatever you want to call him. He's one of the better centers in this league as well. I mean, he gets you rebounds. He gives you great defense. He can score points. I just don't like the idea that everyone's saying Dwight Howard is the best center in this league.
Well, I think when you talk about, best of, even what I just said about Brook Lopez being the best offensive center, I didn't say he was the best center.
Yeah.
I think Dwight Howard is the best center simply for the fact that of his intangibles besides scoring. He can rebound. He can play. He's probably the best defensive center, most athletic. And I think you're seeing the dividends, even with the Lakers in this late run they're making. He's been making a big difference in terms of manning the paint down low. And now it's going to be even more interesting now tonight. Kobe Bryant's expected to play again, and Paul Gasol, who was not expected to be back until the first round of the playoffs.
Wizards.
But the point is, it's not even about who they're playing. It's the fact that Paul Gasol is back, and he was not expected to be back until the first round of the playoffs. So now it gives them even more time to get, because this will be just I think they said the 4th game where the original 5 will play. And how many games into the season are we now?
Yeah, but if you remember,
4th time.
If you remember,
4th.
Earlier in the season, when Gasol was on the court with Howard, they kind of struggled.
They also didn't have Steve Nash.
That's true.
So that's why I'm saying it's the 4th time these all 5 have played. And I mean, what are we? 60 games into the season?
And when you think of Steve Nash, you think of a guy who's a passer, but surprisingly, he's actually 6th in 3-point shooting right now. So he's adding another dimension to that as well. He's also a great. Well, he's lost some speed, so he can't really defend as much as he used to. That could be a problem.
He never can defend.
But I mean, you're looking at the great teams in the league that they're going to have to face in the playoffs. I mean, you have Tony Parker, Chris Paul, 2 of the better point guards who are going to really identify a hole for the Lakers going up against them. Just looking at the playoffs so far, San Antonio Spurs are currently the best team, 52-18. 16 is their record. The Oklahoma City Thunder, 50-19, second place in the West. Third place, the Memphis Grizzlies. 4th, the Los Angeles Clippers. 5th, Nuggets, who I told you they were doing good. They're 48-22. Golden State, Houston, and then the Lakers. And then in the Eastern Conference, you currently have the Miami Heat looking for their 25th win against the Detroit Pistons. They're going to get that more than likely. Indiana, who is going to be without David West for a few games now, is in 2nd place. The Knicks are in 3rd. Brooklyn Nets are in 4th, yet somehow the Nets already clinched a spot. Doesn't matter. The Knicks will get there eventually. The Atlanta Hawks in 5th. Chicago Bulls in 6th. Boston Celtics in 7th. Milwaukee Bucks in 8th.
Yeah. I guess the watch still continues for the Miami Heat, thanks to ESPN. Now we're talking about can the 7-2 Bulls and Lakers and all this stuff. I really don't want to talk about that because I wasn't around then.
You know what the worst
part
is?
So I don't want to compare.
You know what the worst part is?
It's just ridiculous.
The fact that they actually had to come back from 27 against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then everyone's talking about, it's a great comeback. Look how short. I mean,
they were without their 3 best players. 3.
Varejao, Kyrie Irving, and Deion Waiters.
How are you even down 27 to that team? I mean, it was even more embarrassing to be down 27 to a team that didn't even have the 3 best players on the team.
And LeBron didn't even have double digits until very late in the 3rd quarter.
The game didn't impress me. The streak doesn't impress me, to be dead honest with you, because, I mean, what do you expect from a team that has 3 top 15 players in the league? No other team has 3 top 15 players, including the best player in the league.
They have quality bench players, too. Ray Allen, Rashard Lewis, Birdman, all those players.
I mean, it's not surprising to me. Is it a feat? Yes. And if they break history, yes, that would be definitely, something to talk about. My only fear is, will this streak get them to the point where they'll be drained by the playoff time? I hope so.
Well, I mean, they're playing weak teams coming forward. I mean, you got to face Detroit
tonight. Everybody said Cleveland was a weak team, and they took them they were down 27. So, I mean, they took them a whole game to really beat a team like that.
All I'm saying is this weekend they got to face Detroit and Charlotte. I mean, the one team who's going to really give them problems will probably end up being San Antonio. We'll see what happens down the road. This is going to wrap up our show, the Sports Porters Radio Show. I don't know if we're going to have a show next week or not. Sports Director Sam Mines has mentioned we're going to start covering softball. I don't know if it's going to be a Friday game or a Saturday game. If you want to know, just follow me on Twitter at AJ Bisons or at Aubrey's Twitter.
ABZ382 at twitter.com.
Yeah, so just follow us on there. Or there's always a Facebook page, Sports Reporters Radio Show. We'll have a podcast from this show on there. We have our past few interviews on there. We had Sean Brace this past week, 97.5, The Fanatic in Philadelphia. He was on talking about Geno Smith and obviously the rest of the Eagles and Phillies. But this is the Sports Reporters Radio Show. I'm the host, AJ Speier.
Just a quick update before we go off. Another upset, if you want to say. Number 9, Temple, did beat number 8, NC State today.
Get out.
76-72. And at halftime, LaSalle, 13 seed, up on the 4 seed Kansas State, 44-26 at halftime.
Wow. And Creighton's beating Cincinnati. A lot of people thought Cincinnati might possibly upset Creighton.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the nature of college basketball. But so we'll see. We'll be here next week.
Next year, I'm predicting all upsets in the first round. I don't even care.
That's what you have to do. I feel like you can't go with the usual like the NBA.
But yeah, this is the Sports.
One game, you're done.
Well, another score. Miami's up 73-46 over Pacific. I mean, how people thought that was going to happen anyway. But yeah, this is the Sports Reporters Radio Show. I'm the host, AJ Speier, alongside Aubrey Gibert, signing out.